12th studio failure this morning.
The new one.
Yeah, the new studio failed. And, my attitude with that is kind of just like, if we can't make cameras and a computer work, and despite all the previous failures we've had, there's not a single person here who can make sure that either the studio is operating or secondary studio is operating. We've gotten to a point in the company where everyone's kind of just kicked their feet up and said, I'm doing what I need to be doing. Yeah. And then that just means I'm Sisyphus pushing the rock up. The problem is people are sitting on the rock. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could it be? Could Timcast actually be ending? I don't know. I don't know at this junction. Let me first say, I think that Tim Pool and that entire operation is fantastic, and I think that they have done more to highlight dissident viewpoints than basically any large platform. I mean, right up there with Rogan. He does it every single night. He has, I guess not every night is there a dissident up there, but I'd say the majority of the time he has someone up there that otherwise probably would not be able to speak to an audience in the millions, as I've done myself probably a dozen times by now. He's had on so many great people, and I think he's done a phenomenal job, honestly. I think he works really, really hard. I think that the people there are really good people, and I totally understand why he wants to quit. I 100% get it. For those that aren't super familiar with me, I did run a mortgage company before I became a podcaster, and it's tough. It's tough to have to try and manage people. This is why I didn't have employees. I used contracting arrangements for everything because it's just such a pain to try and actually have people that you're responsible for everything. Basically, I just made it so that they either get the job done and they get paid, or they don't, and I go with someone else. And that, to me, worked best. But Tim has grown Timcast IRL into probably a 40-person operation. I don't know the exact numbers, but it seems very significant. And it's obvious to me that he is suffering the consequences of his success, in that he has tried to endeavor to expand the operation far outside of what it began as. For those that don't know the history, Tim actually began as a YouTuber skateboarder. Then he transitioned to a street reporter, doing kind of men on the street interviews and covering Occupy Wall Street. And then he started to do Timcast, I guess was just a straight news show solo operation that he would do a couple times a day, became extraordinarily successful, and then decided to do Timcast IRL. Apparently the iteration of that even evolved, and it became what it is today. And it has become, as far as I know, the #1 nightly news program on YouTube. So tremendous success. Whether you like Tim or not, that's irrefutable. And I think that his operation is reflective of his efforts and his energy, and obviously the fact that he had a vision for something that didn't exist yet, and he was the first to move on it. So I commend him for that. And I'm not sure that his decision is final and that he, in fact, will be shutting down the operation permanently this week or not. I've reached out to him. He and I have become pretty good friends over the past couple of years, and or at least I think so. I don't know if he would agree, but I think we're friends. And I messaged him. I'm sure he got bombarded with messages from people after the announcement last night that he was strongly considering shutting down Timcast IRL. But I messaged him, and I just offered him my basically a sounding board. Because I was an entrepreneur and kind of a sole proprietor, I very much understand what he's going through. When I was growing, I had opportunities to expand and do a bunch of creative things that I ultimately chose not to, because I didn't want to deal with the stuff that he's dealing with. So I think that I would be in a good position to give him some advice if he needs it. I'm also the type that never asks for advice and never calls anybody or asks anybody for assistance or a shoulder to cry on. I just don't do that. So he's probably like me and probably will not be reaching out, but I figured I would offer nonetheless. Also, this is public knowledge, so I can obviously talk about it, but he and I were in talks to have me be the CEO of Cast Brew, as well as the host of Poker with the Boys, which never got off the ground. That didn't happen. We couldn't come to terms, and that's fine. Certainly no big deal on my end. I don't really want to become a CEO of a coffee company at this junction. I'm much more interested in focusing on what I do currently, but I was willing to because I thought that the opportunity was interesting enough in the other arenas that are more in line with my passions. So who knows? But here's the truth. I don't think I can work. I don't think I can keep up with Tim at this point. Like when he says he works 16 hours a day, like he ain't lying. Homeboy works fucking stop. Like that dude goes hard. And I'm not really at that phase of my life anymore. Like I don't want to work that hard. I think most people, if they're being honest, they don't want to work that hard either. I think that's going to be his major struggle is that, like, he even said it on the show last night. He's like, everybody's, for the most part, working hard, and for the most part, everybody gets 90% of their job done. And he's like, but I have to pick up the extra 10. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, yeah, but what is 100? Like, what are you actually asking of these people? Because maybe 90 is the maxing out their efforts. I don't know. I'm just, theorizing. But given how hard he works, I wouldn't be surprised if his demands on his employees is very steep. I don't know that for a fact. I've never actually seen what they're required to do. But when you're that hard charging, it kind of reminds me of Kobe Bryant, where like you would have teammates that once they had the ring on their finger, they're like, I love this guy, Hall of Famer all the way. But if you were to interview them mid-season, they're like, this dude's a lunatic. He works too hard. Nobody works this hard. He wakes up on off days at 4 a.m. and goes and shoots. Like, who does that? He's a total freak. I feel like Tim may be that type. I don't know for a fact, but I think that could be part of what he's dealing with. Really, the issue is that once you get to this level of success, if you don't have everyone around you that is also one, I think they need to be profit sharing. I don't know if that's how his deals are structured with his employees, so that they feel inspired to work as hard as you, because obviously when Timcast or Timcast IRL makes more money, Tim, you would think, probably makes more money. So in my opinion, if you're ever structuring an employment contract with people, it's highly, I think that in order to get the best performance, it's probably good to have it tied to some sort of percentage, spiff or bonus. Now, that's not to say that that's the reason that things are falling apart. Maybe it's even structured that way and it's just not working. I don't know. But I think that also it's just burnout. Like, and he never said the word, so I am pulling this out of thin air. And maybe he's not burnout, but I feel like if you're going to cover the day-to-day minutia of the news and do it, 2 hours in the morning, and then I think he does like another hour in the afternoon, and then like another 2 hours on IRL. So he's like, I don't know if he's 5 hours live per day, something nutty. And then he does it 5 days a week. That's an insane amount of work. So my belief is that he's probably just burnout. Like, I don't know how any human being wouldn't be burnout doing that. I know there's a lot of AM radio guys that do stuff like that, but I think that at some point it just wears on you. Like, how couldn't it? Or like, how would it not? So that's kind of my original assessment as to what's going on, is that he's probably just burnout. If he is interested in my advice would be take a week off. Take 2 weeks off. Don't make this decision in the heat of the battle. Like what happened was, for those that are totally in the dark, apparently they've had systemic failures, is what he described it as, when it comes to the new studio. They moved to this brand new studio. It's phenomenal. Huge skate park, of course. It's the only way Tim does things. And there was a graphics card that burned out. And because of that, they ended up having to go back to the old studio last night to do the show. And Tim was clearly frustrated, exasperated. Yeah, that's the right word. And I think that that's really what we're dealing with, is that he's going so hard, and then there's something that prevents him from continuing on his normal pattern of doing the shows consistently. And he's just like, fuck it, I'm done. And I don't blame him. He makes a crazy amount of money. And I think in a lot of ways, he's suffering from his own success. Like once you are making so much money, as he's very open about, he makes a ton of money. Do you want to work as hard? He's working 16 hours a day. He could probably pick up more of these pieces if he worked 17 hours a day. And I bet Tim, before he was super wealthy, would have done that. But now that you're rolling in dough, do you still want to do it? And I think that the answer for most normal people is no. I've got enough money. Why the fuck am I working and I'm only getting 7 hours of free time per day? This is insane. I've got to cut back. but he's so hard charging. He's been doing it so consistently for so many years. I could imagine a scenario where he's just like, he's kind of looking for an out, where you don't want to quit, so you're going to find a reason to quit. Now, I'm not saying that's what he's doing. I'm just saying I could envision a person in his position might look for that out. Maybe he found it. We'll see. Anyways, I just wanted to say, to Tim, to the entire crew, thoughts are with you guys, and I love a bunch of those people over there. I mean, I don't know all of them, but a bunch of them are awesome, and they've become good friends of mine, and I feel like they're all going to land on their feet, and I personally think that there's a really good chance that Tim will decide to keep the show going, and I hope he does. I think it's a fantastic program that allows for open conversations about topics that don't get talked about nearly enough, and I think that's a huge value to the people of the world and America, and it would be a shame. It'd be a shame if we lose him. So cheers to you, Tim. Cheers to you, to the entire crew, and I hope you guys figure it out. I'm rooting for you, and if you need any help, I'm a call away. And one other note I would give to Tim is that if he doesn't want to step down as CEO and he wants to maintain his CEO position, he has that option. Basically, what I would say to him is that, look, if you're going to be working 16 hours a day, it's almost impossible for you to be the on-hand 24/7 manager that's necessary for an operation of this magnitude. You have the resources that are necessary to hire someone of the highest skill set and caliber to take over that very important role. Your role ought to be, as the talent, to be the talent. So that should be your focus. It has been your focus, which is good, but that's the reason that other things are not getting accomplished. So my only recommendation to him, if he wants to maintain this operation at this magnitude, he can either downsize, continue to do the operation on a kind of a bare bones level, or you can bring in either a CEO, as Elon Musk did with Twitter with Yaccarino, or you can have what's called a chief of staff, or just a high level second in command. You need a second in command that can actually be the taskmaster, the whip cracker, the hiring, firing guy. Don't go the HR route. Don't have an entire branch of HR people. Then you'll have to deal with woke nonsense and lawsuits and all that garbage. Don't do that. But you just need to basically give someone the authority to hire and fire. And I think that would alleviate a tremendous amount of the issues that you've been dealing with, and it would free up more of your time so that you can focus on what you are best at, which is to be the talent. That's where you're really making the money, is that people tune in the vast majority of the time to watch you and to hear from you, as evidenced by all the success that you've had with Timcast News, or the solo show that you do. Timcast IRL, obviously people tune in for the guests, but for the most part, they're there for you. That's the tie that binds, and I think that needs to be your priority. I think that the revenue stream that you've generated by doing all of these operations is fantastic. Many of the extraneous endeavors that you've laid out or tried to pursue that have not materialized or become profitable, I would highly recommend that if you don't have the heart to cut some of those, you need to bring in somebody that's willing to. That's very simple. I'm probably not telling you anything that you don't already know if you're watching this right now, but I think that would alleviate much of the stress, allow you to feel as if this operation is running more smoothly, and allow for you to focus on what you are truly great at, which is talking about the news. And I think that's probably the problem, is that you're wearing too many hats, and you're forced into two roles, and only one of which is your true passion. The other one is not. And I think that's probably the issue at the end of the day. I wish you tremendous success moving forward, and I hope that this is not the end of IRL. It has been a blessing to me, to my community, to the country, as far as I'm concerned, to have on voices like myself, if I don't get too egotistical by saying so. I think it's been a huge value. I'm really appreciative, and I think that there are hundreds of other people out there like me that have been on the show that feel the same. And I know the audience feels the same, because many of them have become my audience, and they tell me about it all the time. I found you on Timcast. I'm so glad that I found you. You've been, whatever nice things they've had to say to me. It has been a product of the opportunities that you've granted me by having me on the show a dozen times. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that are feeling like that. I don't know if you have quite the Belichick tree or the Joe Rogan tree, but you got your own tree, Tim. And everybody on those branches is rooting for you. Keep going.
I don't understand how we got so toxic and just so divided and so bitter. And I get why sometimes people just don't want to pay attention to it. And we all have friends like that. We have family members who just like, it's all It's all a circus out there. I get that.
Hey, Barack. Clint Russell here. So glad you asked. Well, it was actually 2011. It was the NDAA reauthorization that repealed or basically replaced the Smith Modernization Act, which allowed you to propagandize us, as well as the executive order that you signed that very same year, which mandated DEI departments across all federal bureaus in the United States of America. Or if that isn't what led to the toxicity, which I think it is, you could add to that the fact that it was your FBI which lied to the FISA court in the last year of your presidency to spy on Donald Trump, or the Steele dossier that was paid for by the Clinton campaign. Or it could be the 800 years that Donald Trump was facing for a bunch of things that were really not valid. I don't know. Could be any of those things. But for you to feign incredulity as if you have not the slightest as to why things have gotten so toxic. Oh, friend. Oh, I think you know. And if you're being honest with yourself, you should feel bad about it. You don't, because you live in Martha's Vineyard in a mansion that no one could even fathom owning, as you propagandize us about climate change and tell us that everyone's going to drown because the seas are rising, and yet you have this incredible palatial estate right on the water. Anyways, you're a fraud and you're a con man, and you've actually played a tremendous role in destroying this country. And I'm just so appreciative that you asked why things have gotten so toxic, because it gave me an opportunity to let you know.
Do you regret signing on to the letter?
Oh, absolutely not, because those words are still true.
Do you think
it has all the
changed
classic
outcome of
earmarks.
an election?
Oh, absolutely not. No, this
Even
is
though it wasn't true.
No.
It had the classic earmarks, but it wasn't true.
what is not true.
That it was Russian disinformation.
That's not what we said in the letter. Read the actual letter, and we said we do not know if this is Russian disinformation.
It has
right?
all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation.
Exactly. The difference between an information campaign and a disinformation
campaign not get to candidate
and a
Joe
misinformation
Biden.
campaign. It's not my fault if people don't look up definitions.
I know, but the purpose of the letter is to have an effect. And the nuance that you're talking about here never made it to candidate Biden, because he said it plainly on a debate stage that obviously affected the dynamic. Yeah. Don't you think?
I would absolutely love for all news media to show nuance on all these issues instead of racing to sound bites. And in this case, some news media race to sound bites. That's not helpful for the American people. And I really wish that people
was helpful for the American people.
Well, instead of quoting one sentence from it, if people actually read maybe an entire paragraph, it shows that we don't know if it's Russian.
It affected anything?
I don't know if it affected anything. We don't analyze American political environments.
We were trying to.
What we were trying to do is point out that this has all the classic earmarks of a Russian information campaign. Not to say it's Russian disinformation, but to say that the propagation through American media and international media has all the classic earmarks of a Russian information campaign, because we've seen it over and over and over again. They love to sow these kind of divisions and exacerbate them. That's not American, that's Russian.
I got you.
Yeah.
But it ended up being a Biden information campaign because he used it in the campaign and in that debate.
I encourage you to ask him about that.
And I will.
So the reason I played that clip is because it's those type of activities that are happening at the federal level that are sowing such toxicity, such discontent amongst the American people. And to a large extent, that is a product of Barack Obama's tenure as the president of the United States. I mean, that is one of the men who signed on to the letter that said that the Hunter laptop story had all of the hallmarks of a Russian information operation. Again, he was very clear there and very careful that he was saying, we weren't saying that the information was false. We were saying that it has the hallmarks of a Russian information operation, in that its intent was to divide the American people. Well, when you put out a letter like that, that implies that the contents of the story from the New York Post was in fact void, invalid, and then it comes out after the election in which Donald Trump loses, that in fact that story was not true. In fact, your letter was not true, rather, in that it was a true story and the laptop was real. Do you see how that would sow discontent? So as you're allegedly attempting to prevent the division that the Russians are attempting to sow, the Russians did not have an involvement with that story. And in fact, you have now divided this country irreparably because of your actions. And you sit up there unremorseful, unrepentant, unwilling to acknowledge the error or the danger of your actions, you and your 50 other brethren. It's reprehensible. Oh, baby, we back. Anton's Land of Biltong. If you like a low-carb, high-quality protein snack, this is the one. This is the spot. You ain't got to look any further. I said yesterday that it was no carbs. It's not no carbs. There is low carbs. So I apologize. Let me correct the record. But if you are interested in checking this out, trust me, once you try it, you will buy it multiple times. Landofbiltong.com. Use the promo code LOCKDOWN or LOCKDOWN10, depending on how much you order, to get the maximal discount. Again, landofbiltong.com, promo code LOCKDOWN. This stuff is South African beef jerky. It's absolutely delicious. It's healthier than the vast majority of snacks out there. I love it. I eat it almost every day. It's basically keeping me alive at this point. It's fantastic. Land of Biltong. That's land of BILTONG.com. Promo code LOCKDOWN. It's extraordinarily dangerous for this country, and you've played a huge role in destroying the fabric that binds us together, totally without remorse. Just absolutely remarkable. But I think that's the tie that binds, is that his mentality is the same as Barack Obama's. They've done nothing wrong. Sure, they may censor us. Sure, they may lie about the contents of major breaking news stories. Sure, they may have thrown off one of the oldest American publications from social media in the days leading up to a major presidential election on a story that was, in fact, true. But did they do anything wrong? Do they regret anything? No. No, they don't. In fact, the only thing they regret is that you and I continue to exist and speak out. And I think that at the end of the day is what's dividing us most of all, is that more and more people like you and I are realizing the perspective that they have about all of us, that we are a problem to them, something that they would like to get rid of. And that doesn't feel very good, particularly when you were the hope and change candidate, Barack. You were supposed to be the guy that puts the racist legacy of America behind us. And instead, you decided to exacerbate it. And you decided to make it worse. You decided to play off of racist stereotypes after the American people voted largely in a huge, huge turnout to vote for the first black president, not once but twice. And then we came out of the other side of your tenure in a more divided, more race conscious, more racist state by your own allegations. It did not help us. It hurt us. We paid a huge price. You took the kindness and the non-racism of the American people, you used it to your advantage, and then you divided us based off race as the gift that we received in return. How is that fair? How could you look in the mirror and say that you've done nothing wrong? And same to the 51 intelligence agents that signed off on that letter. We all know what you were doing. You were running a cover operation to try and bury a story that was damaging to Joe Biden in the days prior to the election. It couldn't be more clear that's what happened there. And you don't regret it because you did your job. Because you wrote the letter, and you were very careful with your language because you knew that you were lying, danced around the truth enough to make it so that you probably could never be truly held to account. And as a consequence, New York Post and everybody else that was sharing that story was just suspended or banned entirely. And Joe Biden, by the skin of his teeth, sails into the White House. You did your job. That's what you were asked to do. And from the research I've done, it looks like Antony Blinken was actually responsible for ordering that. These people are dangerous, man. And most people don't even understand the depravity, or the depth of the depravity, I should say. Just so you know how I know, here is a press release from the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. Came out June 25th of 2024, titled The Intelligence Community 51. How CIA contractors colluded with the Biden campaign to mislead American voters. On October 14, 2020, the New York Post published a report detailing how Hunter Biden used the position and influence of his father, now President Joe Biden, for personal gain with the apparent awareness of President Biden. 5 days later, on October 19, 2020, 5 days later, come on, 51 former intelligence officials signed on to a public statement that stated that the Hunter Biden laptop story had all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation in an attempt to discredit the New York Post reporting. Since April of 22, the committees have been conducting oversight into the origins of this statement. The committees wrote to all 51 former officials requesting relevant documents and testimony. The committee's first joint interim staff report revealed how the now infamous and discredited Hunter Biden statement originated with a call from top Biden campaign official and now Secretary of State Antony Blinken to former Deputy CIA Director Michael Morell to provide talking points and cover for the Biden campaign to discredit serious allegations about the Biden family's influence peddling. Morell's testimony also exposed that the goal of the statement was to aid President Biden in the final debate of the 2020 presidential campaign, which, I might add, Joe Biden went on to do.
Joe, they're calling you a corrupt politician.
Nobody-
President Trump, I want to stay on the issue of race. We're talking about the issue.
Laptop from hell.
President Trump, we're
Nobody.
talking about race right now, and I do want to stay on the issue of race. President Trump,
And I
you've
have
just
to respond to that.
Please,
Because look,
very quickly.
there are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what this he's accusing me of is a Russian plan. They have said that this has all the five former heads of the CIA, both parties, say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage. Nobody believes it except his and his good friend Rudy Giuliani.
You mean the laptop is now another Russia hoax?
And that's exactly what.
Is this
that's
where you're
exactly
going?
what.
This
was
is
told.
where he's.
So in fact, Joe Biden, whether he knew or not, is kind of irrelevant. He knew that what his son had done was not good. And the head of the CIA, at the direction of Antony Blinken, so Morell at the direction of Antony Blinken, gets those 51 active and former whatever intelligence analysts to sign on to that letter, just so that during the debate, when Trump inevitably would bring up that laptop, that Joe Biden could say, with plausible deniability, not knowing whether or not they were right, that we had 50 former intelligence agents, that, and including 5 former heads of the CIA, that all say that this is a Russian plot. He lied. They lied. They all lied. They all lied to you just to try and get him into the White House and keep Trump out of power. And if you look at Trump's reaction to that, the incredulity with his response, where you go, you gotta be kidding me. This is another Russia. You gotta be kidding me. That was sincere. He couldn't believe it because that was the first time he had even heard of it, because he could have never imagined that you would have 50 intelligence agents that would sign on to a letter of such obvious deception. And that's what happened. Now let's listen to the head of the CIA as he describes it.
I told him that I had received a call from Tony Blinken, then a senior official on the Biden campaign, asking me if I had seen the New York Post story, if my memory serves, and I don't know exactly how you want to do this, but my memory's sketchy, right? This is a long time ago. I believe I said I had not seen it. I believe he summarized it for me. And he asked me if I thought the Russians may have been involved in any way in the emergence of these emails.
But prior to his call, you did not have any intent to write this statement.
I did not.
Okay, so his call triggered
Yes.
intent in you.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. What was the intent of the statement?
There were 2 intents. One intent was to share our concern with the American people that the Russians were playing on this issue. And 2, it was to help Vice President Biden.
So there's the former head of the CIA, Morell, saying that, yeah, the letter was at the direct orders of Antony Blinken, that they had no intention of writing it, that it was that call that inspired it, and that they wrote it explicitly to help Joe Biden, because the head of the CIA wanted Joe Biden to win. And on the inverse of that, obviously, he wanted Donald Trump to lose. Now ask yourself why. Why would they want Joe Biden to win? Oh, it could be that Joe Biden was on the Intelligence Committee for decades and basically signed off on any war, any operations, any funding that they ever wanted, whereas Donald Trump would periodically throw sand in the gears of the war machine and say, hey, what are we doing here? Why are we have this terrorist group? Why do we have Al-Qaeda fighting ISIS? Aren't these both our enemies? Trump, unfortunately, he never dug deep enough to actually understand what was going on, and the fact that all of these terrorist organizations had, to some extent, been funded by the American military-industrial complex and the intelligence agencies. But he was smart enough to realize, hey, I'm going around being told by the Intelligence Committee and all of my advisors that these are our enemies. So when they're fighting each other, why would we possibly intervene? Why wouldn't we just let them fight? Doesn't that make sense? Very, very kind of like bro science way of doing geopolitical analysis, but it's better than Biden from my vantage point. At least he's asking obvious questions. He didn't dig enough to actually figure out the truth. But here's the truth is that, yeah, these are our organizations to some extent, that they work at the behest of the CIA oftentimes, and that when they're fighting each other, we don't like that because we want them to be around to do our bidding. So that's why they intervened, Trump. Now you know. Man, that story about Morell is unbelievable. Antony Blinken and Morell. I mean, what they did there was actively propagandizing the American people to help a political candidate. This is from the same party that will tell you that they are the defenders of democracy. and truth, right? That they're interested in the truth. Want to stop mis and disinformation, right? Well, who was responsible for mis and disinformation in the lead up to the 2020 election? Ask yourself that. And the answer is quite clear.
Well, let me ask you this. Have you seen anything like the public statement in all of your years of experience?
Like? You mean with that many? What's the like?
I think,
reference?
with that many signatories of that caliber, who would all have prestigious positions within the intelligence community, especially at the CIA, people you knew personally.
No, I have not seen anything of that nature.
Breaking tonight, Hunter Biden appears in a federal courtroom in Delaware. He's preparing for a June 3rd start to his trial on gun charges. We now know more about what evidence jurors will see, including the contents of that infamous laptop that the U.S. government now says did, in fact, belong to Hunter. Correspondent David Spunt is in Wilmington tonight with the latest. Good evening, Dave.
Right, good evening, and our viewers would remember that laptop, 51 former intelligence officials back in 2020 before the election said that it was Russian disinformation. Turns out it was not Russian disinformation. Hunter Biden will be back here at this Wilmington, Delaware courthouse on June 3rd.
Are you ready to start building wealth by putting your precious metals to work? Silver isn't just a precious metal, it's a tangible asset and a great way to diversify any investment portfolio. By the way, I think it's at an all-time high, or like high over the past 10 years, just broke $35 an ounce. Setting that aside, with Monetary Metals, you don't just own physical silver, you own silver that works for you to generate more silver, growing your total ounces over time. Right now, you can earn 12% annual interest on silver paid in silver in their latest offering if you're an accredited investor. Click the link in the description or head to monetary-metals.com/lockdown to learn more. Monetary Metals is revolutionizing the way you invest in gold and silver. They've been paying interest in silver and gold for over 8 years and helping you grow your wealth in real tangible assets. Finally, there's a true alternative to saving in dollars, a yield on gold and silver with Monetary Metals. This is the first true silver bond since 1834. You can earn a 12% annual interest on silver paid in silver, but you must be an accredited investor to participate. It's a 3-year term, and the bond is financing a publicly traded mining company located in the western United States. Again, go to monetary-metals.com/lockdown or click the link in the description to learn more. And the truth will set you free. Yeah, that was Hunter's laptop. Yeah, it had a lot of evidence of likely severe criminality when it came to Ukraine, China, a lot of other sordid stuff that I don't care as much about when it comes to drug use, but also some sexual peculiarities that deserve further investigation, to put it mildly. And the CIA actively covered it up at the behest of Antony Blinken and Biden. And if you think that Hillary and Obama didn't do similar stuff like that, well, of course they did. In fact, I've already detailed it earlier, that they were responsible for the Steele dossier, that they were responsible for the lying to the FISA court, or at least it was Obama's FBI that lied to the FISA court in order to spy on the top contender for the White House in Donald Trump, before he was even the president of the United States. How is this stuff all not illegal? Why do we not ever talk about it? Why have we spent 8 years talking about the criminality of Donald Trump and how he's this existential threat and this danger and blah, blah, blah? But we don't have there's no adjudication for all of this depravity? Nothing ever? Once you have this realization, this epiphany that, in fact, the justice system only goes one direction, that it crushes political opposition and it lifts up and protects and defends those that are in their good graces, that's when you start to realize why someone like me, someone that has so many disagreements with Donald Trump, would like to see him prevail over the CIA and the FBI and the three-letter agency's chosen candidate in Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or any of their other chosen candidates, Obama, Clinton, all of them. It's because that's how the system works. And I want to see that system break down, because it's totally immoral, it's totally illegal, and there's no justice to be found. So every time Donald Trump prevails, it defeats that game plan. And that's a good thing.
Donald Trump putting on a little McDonald's costume because he thinks that's what people do. They're not trying to empathize with us. They are making fun of us. They are making fun of us. Donald Trump thinks that people who work at McDonald's are a joke. Elon Musk thinks that dangling money in front of a working person is a cute thing to do when the election of our lives is before us. Because that's what people and billionaires like that do.
For those unfamiliar, AOC is flipping out because Donald Trump had one of the most successful photo ops in American presidential campaign history. That was about 2 days ago now, but it was the outrage was insane. You had people, pointing out that it was an op and that it was, they had actually shut down the McDonald's, and that sure he was serving people, but they were already like curated customers and they knew who was coming. Yeah. Donald Trump has been shot at, or, there's been 2 attempts on his life at minimum, maybe multiple more than that, potentially. And he has to have the Secret Service make sure that there's not some lunatic coming through the McDonald's drive-thru that takes another shot at the guy. So, yeah, none of us actually thought that Donald Trump had dropped out of the campaign trail and became a fry cook at McDonald's. But point I made was that the success of the tactic, the photo op, is proportional to the outrage that's created. Because they have to spin this negatively because it went so well. So they have to try and find a way to make people think, oh, that wasn't actually a good thing. Because it was obviously adorable to see Donald Trump serving people French fries. Was adorable to see a billionaire who takes a dump on a gold toilet to be, working the fry station. Adorable, hilarious, whatever you want to call it. It was a great moment, whether you like Trump or not. It was obviously awesome, and they realized it, so they had to do full court press to try and suppress it. But no one thought that they could wake up today and head to Mickey D's for a Trump prepared McMuffin. Yet the corporate news hacks have no choice but to try and paint this in a negative light, so they dutifully churn out stories as if we were actually tricked into believing a former president billionaire was now manning the fry station for $8 an hour. Trump's team knows that they will get zero positive coverage, so they've resorted to just doing positive things for people and letting the media demonstrate their own depravity by portraying it as somehow bad. They could have let the story die out. Not nearly as many people would have known about it, but instead they went full court press, and now everyone has heard about it. Basically, TDS Streisand effect. The fact it highlighted Harris's lies about her ever working there was just an added bonus. They managed to turn a dude who lives in a Manhattan skyrise penthouse and Florida mansion with a golden toilet, no less, into your blue-collar everyman. Better yet, their own seething contempt for the working class was made plain for all to see. And the best part, they did it to themselves. And they did. And I think that's the hilarious thing about AOC, still pretending as if she's this bartender from the Bronx or whatever, when in fact she's a multimillionaire, as they all are, eventually. And that's how the political system actually works. And that they are totally disconnected from the working man, and the fact that they were just so perplexed as to why Donald Trump would do this, why he would lower himself to go and work fast food when millions of Americans, including myself, got their start at a fast food place. In fact, mine was at a Wendy's. And I'm sure many of you, that was your first step on the economic ladder as well. It was kind of what people of my generation did. It seems less and less kids are doing that, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that these jobs are taken up by immigrants now. I could be wrong. Maybe the kids just don't want to work, but I see very, very few young people working fast food the way I did when I was a kid, when it was all young people, because that was the only people that would take those jobs because it was a very bad paying job. And if you had no experience, that was how you got experience, was to go take a bad paying job. That doesn't appear to be happening anymore. But I thought it was just a stroke of genius from his campaign advisor, or whoever came up with that idea, and it couldn't have gone better, and it made the Democrats look atrocious. I've got a couple other stories that are developing. Don't have much to say on them at this point, but I do want you guys to be aware. According to Matt Taibbi's reporting earlier this morning, along with Paul Thacker, which Elon Musk replied with, "This is war." So he's taking it very seriously. Apparently there is a whistleblower that came out with internal documents that demonstrated that the advisor to Keir Starmer, the new prime minister of the UK, of this organization called CCD Hate. So he was advising the Labour Party. He's now advising Kamala Harris's campaign, and he was also the former head of the CCD Hate organization, which was a alleged not-for-profit that was trying to get rid of hate speech on the internet, blah, blah, blah. But in fact, according to the reporting by Thacker and Taibbi, documents showing the Labour Party's political front's objective is, quote, kill Musk's Twitter, end quote, through, quote, advertising focus, end quote, meaning harass his advertisers. And then they have the internal documents provided by the whistleblower that demonstrated this case. And it's a fascinating story, very concerning that someone who has been responsible for trying to suppress my free speech, my primary outlet for how I get to reach the world, he is now advising Kamala Harris's campaign. That doesn't make me feel good at all. So we're going to keep our eyes on that one, see if there's anything that comes of it. But as of now, it's just yet another hammer against Kamala Harris for president, as best I can tell. There's also an alleged major security breach with a Pentagon senior staffer leaks Israel's Iran strike plans. So for those that aren't aware, Israel had promised some sort of response to the attacks that Iran launched in response to the attacks from Israel, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. And there was allegedly now a major attack that's going to come from Israel towards Iran, and the plans of that attack have been leaked by someone working in the Pentagon. A senior Pentagon staffer, Arian Tabatabai, has allegedly been identified as the leaker of highly classified documents detailing Israel's military preparations to strike Iran. The FBI is investigating this major breach, which has sent shockwaves through Washington and raised concerns about U.S. intelligence security. This is from Mario Nafal. The leaked documents allegedly revealed Israel's covert military activities in addition to a planned strike in retaliation for Iran's strike earlier this month against Israel. So, very interesting. Apparently, this lady, I guess she was put in under Obama. That's what I read earlier, and may have been responsible for some of the Iran nuclear deal. But if she's responsible for leaking confidential documents of Israel's attack strategy, that would be a big deal. I think it's more disturbing from an America First perspective. Why in God's name is the U.S. privy to the detailed plans of the Israeli military as they strike Iran? Like, is this our war or is it not? Because I don't think that we would probably be sending out our detailed strike plans to every other country on earth, but apparently we get theirs in advance. So maybe we're a little bit more involved than we're being told about. What do you think? Yeah, I think probably so.
The Cheney thing, do we really have to do that?
Look, it goes broader than that. Look, Bernie Sanders, Dick Cheney, Taylor Swift.
No.
That one.
The
shooting?
No.
Having the Cheneys on board?
No. You can't Dick Cheney or Taylor Swift. No.
We're a big tent.
What country did Taylor Swift get us to invade? No.
Yeah. No, don't you think, though, that, and I do this, I believe this, there is still a core group of folks out there, your point being, and not joke, the don't tread on me, the Reagan piece of this, the libertarian piece, but the constitutional piece, there are a lot of people out there. I think Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney give permission to those folks who want to find a reason to do the right thing.
Hey, Tim, no, the fuck it doesn't. No. Actually, the complete opposite, friend. Seeing as you know nothing about libertarians, let me tell you, we're not fans of Dick Cheney. And I don't think many conservatives are fans of him either. So this is just a total misread. And it to me, the primary takeaway is that the Democrats are so disconnected from anybody who's not a lunatic leftist that they can't relate to us at all. They can't relate to conservatives. They can't relate to libertarians. The fact that they think that this Dick Cheney endorsement is something to be advertising as opposed to being ashamed of when it comes to electoral politics is mind-bending. What I have seen after the announcement of Dick Cheney's endorsement of Kamala Harris has been a galvanization of the libertarian movement more broadly when it comes to wishing her a loss, a brutal, brutal loss. Because what it has told us is that, in fact, Kamala Harris will be the torchbearer for the neoconservative movement moving forward. Now, she may not market it as such. She may not speak in the same way that George Bush or a Dick Cheney may have, or a Condoleezza Rice, or any of those folks. Colin Powell. But in terms of what actually happens for the military-industrial complex when it comes to warfare, yeah, she's their gal. It couldn't be more clear. And if you don't believe me, just flash back to a few minutes ago when I was showing you the former acting director of the CIA that was saying as much. That, in fact, they wanted Biden to win. And of course, if the acting director of the CIA wanted Biden to win and was actually running ops to help him, well then, yeah, they feel the same way about Kamala Harris, if not more so, since they forced Joe Biden out and her into his spot to run against Donald Trump. Clearly, she's the chosen one of the intelligence agencies. Clearly, she's the chosen one of the military-industrial complex. And clearly, she is the one that we ought to be rooting against. And thanks to Dick Cheney, it became clear to all libertarians, yeah, we're not really a fan of her, nor are we a fan of Dick Cheney. And Tim Walz, you are an embarrassment that you don't already know that. You laughable fool, you.
It's not a joke.
This is a guy who also wants to replace every civil servant, every single one. Thinks he has a right under the Supreme Court ruling on immunity to be able, if need be, if it was the case, to actually physically eliminate, shoot, kill someone who he believes to be a threat to him. I mean, so I know this sounds bizarre. It sounds like if I said this 5 years ago, you'd lock me up. We gotta lock him up. Politically lock him up.
We got to lock him up. Not a joke. Politically. I like that he caught himself, but yeah, Party of Democracy, accidentally slipping that we got to lock him up. Well, it would seem like just a slip if not for the fact that you actually tried to lock him up, and he's been indicted multiple times and charged with crazy amount of felonies and fined and shot at, and the list goes on and on. Look, I'm going to be honest. We're going to miss Joe a little bit. He's like the accidental version of Donald Trump on the left. Let me explain. Trump has no filter because he's just kind of a savage. Biden has no filter because his brain is broken. And you get the same outcome from time to time, is that Trump, because he's too much of a savage, will just tell the truth accidentally sometimes. Biden, because he's so broken, will just tell you the truth sometimes. And you're like, oh my God, they're saying it out loud. They want to lock up Trump. And look, I think in fairness to Biden, I don't think he has any clue what the actual plans are of the people who really run this country. I genuinely believe that. I do not think he's being read in at this point. I don't think he knows anything. But I think that it's very reasonable to assume that there's a distinct possibility they do intend to use additional lawfare or extrajudicial means to try and stop Donald Trump, because based off of early voting right now, he is an enormous favorite to win the presidency. The betting markets have him at a 64% odds of winning, which is the highest it's ever been. And that's because the early voting, which usually went heavily Democrat, is now outpacing on the GOP side by a massive amount. And it looks as if the lead may be too big to rig, as they say. I don't know. We'll find out. But some people were actually hypothesizing that the advantage for Trump heading into Election Day may be so significant that Election Day voting probably won't even be capable of changing it. I find that very hard to believe. But that's what some of the reporting, I think it was Mark Halperin that was saying that this morning. So we'll find out. But yeah, compared to Kamala Harris's meandering nonsense and the grating tone with which she speaks, Biden's kind of a breath of fresh air, isn't he? Just to have him come back out there, he just mumbling, murmuring, barely getting his sentences out and putting them together. Not a joke, Jack. And it's like, it's obviously not a joke. It wasn't funny, so you don't have to say that. But it's not a joke, Jack. And then deadly serious. And then he goes, but like, not like that though. It's like, so you mean it metaphorically, but it's not a joke. But anyways, sayonara, Joe. They definitely kept you past your expiration date, and it seems as if they put you out to pasture. Have a good one. Your career was a disaster for this country, but amazingly, I will still remember you more fondly than I will Kamala Harris at this point, because she is just the bane of my existence. And the last bit of news before I get out of here is that Joe Rogan has confirmed, or at least his Twitter account, I don't know if it's actually Joe Rogan podcast Twitter account, has confirmed that Donald Trump will be on the Joe Rogan Experience this Friday. So that is the 25th. Big news, because Joe had said in the past that he did not want to help Donald Trump, that he did not want to have him on his show. So apparently he has changed his mind. If you've been following Joe at all over the years, he has had on dissident political figures, but he has rarely had on people that went on to attain power. Like he had on Bernie Sanders, he had on Tulsi Gabbard. He voted for Ron Paul multiple times. So he seems to like the dissidents. He doesn't seem to like the mainstreamers. So the fact that he's having Rogan on is a pretty big deal. Personally, what I would like to see more than anything is, if you're a fan of his, if you've been listening to Rogan, particularly through 2020 and 2021, he had on all of the experts that were shattering the narratives about the lockdown era. I want to see Rogan challenge Donald Trump on that topic. I personally think that Trump will handle it well because he handles pretty much everything well. But I think more than anything, it would be good to have someone who did so much to highlight the depravity of that era, the deceit that we were living through in Rogan, who had all of the experts come through and just shatter the narrative left and right, which is why they went after Rogan hard during those years. If you remember, they tried to cancel him. He knows this stuff inside and out. You know, Joe likes to play as if he's some dummy. He's really not. He actually understands this stuff better than the average person by a large margin because he talks to all these experts for 3 hours at a clip. And I think he could challenge Donald Trump on that era and the legacy, his involvement, his legacy in that era, because Trump has consistently said, I don't get enough credit. I don't get enough credit for, you know, how we addressed that and blah, blah, blah. Rogan could really rough him up in that arena. And I would like to see someone try to. Not because I think Trump can't handle it. I think he can. But I think that it's very important. It would be a healing moment, actually, for this country to have the guy who presided over one of the worst mistakes in my lifetime, if not the worst. Certainly in domestic policy, it was the worst. Not saying he was responsible for every decision, but let's be honest, he did allow it to go down under his watch. It would be great. It would be absolutely fantastic to have him challenge Trump on why didn't you fire Fauci? Why didn't you know? Why didn't you bring in outside information earlier on? Why did you allow Fauci to get up there the entire summer of 2020 and lecture us about how we ought to be distancing and blah, blah, blah? Why didn't you bring in RFK Jr. then? You had a chance to bring in RFK Jr. when you were first entering the White House. Why didn't that happen? Because the reports are that Bill Gates was responsible for basically doing an end round and getting him out of there. Is that true? You know, these are the things that Rogan knows about that he could really get to the bottom of and ask and demand answers. And I hope he does. And just to show I'm being even-headed, I would love to see Kamala Harris on there too. I think it would be the funniest thing in the world to see Kamala Harris on the Joe Rogan Experience. Can you imagine Kamala Harris trying to keep her shit together for 3 hours? Oh! It'd be harder than Joey Diaz not saying racial slurs. It's not possible. She couldn't do it. So that's my dream, is that both Trump goes on there and Joe goes hard on him. I think they're going to have a great conversation. I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. It probably won't be 3 hours. I hope it is. I really want them to go deep. But beyond that, Kamala Harris, sign up. Your campaign is floundering. This is a Hail Mary if ever there was one. You have a 3 hour opportunity to talk to 10 million plus Americans, many of which are not planning to vote for you, but you could persuade a whole hell of a lot of people if you do a good job. You're not going to do a good job, though, because you can't do it. But I would love to watch it. Plus, it'd be great content for the show. And I'm sure you guys would love to hear a breakdown of it. So let's see if it happens. There's only a few weeks left. Like, how many days is that? 13 days left? 12 days left until the election? Crazy. So if she's going to do it, she's got to do it next week.
One of the reasons why we take security very seriously, and it is why we have been working as hard as we can to make sure everything operates, it is that we're getting married and I'm having a child. This is, thank you very much. And this has been for some time now. I've just not said anything.
Shout out to Middle MAGA for the clip. The advantage of doing this show tape delayed is that sometimes breaking news happens that totally debunks my opening salvo, or largely does, and then gives us a nice little closing story. What a beautiful ending. Instead of shutting down Timcast IRL, Tim has decided to get married, and apparently he's going to be a father to boot. When I saw him in DC a couple weeks ago, I noticed that Allison may have been showing. I didn't say anything because it wasn't like super obvious, but now I know that I was right, that in fact she was pregnant. So congrats to Tim. Congrats to the Timcast crew that is still there. Apparently the firings are being handed out left and right. So I don't know who all has been cut and who all is going to stay on. But it does seem as if he took some of my advice and he's going to bring in some outside capital perhaps and have someone handle hiring and firing. But apparently a bunch of people are already being let go. So hopefully the operation can run smoothly from here on, and hopefully those people land on their feet. And hopefully he has many, many more kids, and so do I at some point, and so do you, and so does everybody. And let's just repopulate the earth while we're at it. Anyways, thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please do hit the like button, share it around, subscribe, comment down below if I got anything wrong, and hug and kiss your mother because she's the best because she brought you to me. See you soon. Peace. Don't leave yet. I almost forgot. This weekend, October 25th and 26th, this is your last chance. Make sure if you are anywhere near here, you got to come. It's going to be so much fun. Brogrove.com. It's going to be live podcast, stand-up comedy, total schizo, conspiracy theorist nonsense. It's going to be so much fun. Super brutal comedy. You're going to love it. If you enjoy this show, if you've ever watched Tower Gang, you're going to absolutely love this event. Obviously, I'll be there. Liberty Lockdown. We got Tower Gang. We got Donut. Shane Cashman's going to come through. I didn't even realize that. That's awesome. Cheney, Dave of Isaac's Army, Revenge of the Sis, my guys. Josie, she's awesome. And then Nephilim Death Squad. We got One-on-One and Paranoid American, and more are to be determined. And then the stand-up comedy is the best. Leonardo Joni and special guests. So it's going to be really fun. It's not very expensive at all. If you're nearby, you got to come through. Bohemian Grove. Go to brogrove.com, BRO-Grove.com to grab your tickets right away. We'll see you this weekend.
Welcome to Liberty Lockdown. Please scan your barcode. Your liberty ain't gone, but yeah, it's on hold. Where did it come from and where did it go?